I'm General Mark Milley, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and I've commanded America's most classified military operations for 4 decades. But I've never had to brief a president about authorizing a covert strike against a NATO ally's military assets at 11:47 p.m. on July 23, 2019. I received the order that nearly destroyed the U.S.-Turkey alliance forever. General, you are authorized to neutralize the S-400 systems on Turkish soil by any means necessary. What happened next brought 2 allies to the brink of war. The crisis that would test the very foundations of the NATO alliance began not with Turkey's purchase of Russian S-400 missiles, but with a single intelligence report that landed on my desk 3 months earlier. Our sources inside the Russian Defense Ministry had confirmed what we'd long suspected. The S-400 sale to Turkey wasn't just a weapons transaction. It was the opening move in Putin's most ambitious operation to fracture NATO from within. President Trump's reaction when I briefed him on the intelligence was immediate and explosive. "General," he said, pacing behind the resolute desk, "Erdogan thinks he can play both sides. He thinks he can take Russian missiles and keep American protection. Not on my watch." The president's anger was palpable, but what came next shocked even me. "I want options, General. Real options. If diplomacy fails, I want to know how we stop those missiles from becoming operational." The intelligence that had triggered this crisis was devastating in its implications. The S-400 systems Turkey was purchasing weren't just air defense missiles. They were intelligence-gathering platforms that would give Russia unprecedented access to NATO's most sensitive military capabilities. Every time American F-35 fighters operated near Turkish airspace, the S-400 radars would map their stealth signatures, creating a database that would compromise the most advanced fighter aircraft in the world. But there was something even more sinister in the intelligence package. Russian technicians weren't just delivering the S-400 systems. They were establishing a permanent intelligence presence on Turkish soil. The missile sites would become Russian listening posts, capable of monitoring NATO communications, tracking alliance troop movements, and feeding real-time intelligence directly to Moscow. Erdogan wasn't just buying air defense systems. He was allowing Russian intelligence to establish a foothold inside NATO's southern flank. The National Security Council meeting on July 20, 2019, was unlike any I had attended in my career. Secretary of State Pompeo argued for maximum diplomatic pressure. CIA Director Haspel presented intelligence showing Russian intelligence officers already embedded with Turkish military units. Defense Secretary Esper warned that allowing the S-400 systems to become operational would compromise NATO's entire defense strategy in the Eastern Mediterranean. "Gentlemen," President Trump said after listening to 2 hours of debate, "I've heard enough. Erdogan has made his choice. Now we make ours. General Milley, I want a full spectrum of options on my desk within 48 hours. Diplomatic, economic, and military. If Turkey wants to play with Russian fire, they need to understand the consequences." The military options development took place in the most classified facilities within the Pentagon. The challenge wasn't just neutralizing the S-400 systems. It was doing so without triggering a war with a NATO ally that hosted American nuclear weapons and critical military installations. The operation would require surgical precision, perfect timing, and the kind of plausible deniability that could preserve the alliance, even as we attacked Allied infrastructure. The first option was cyber warfare. Our teams could potentially disable the S-400 systems through electronic attack, making them inoperable without physical destruction. But intelligence indicated that Russian technicians had installed hardened communication systems, specifically designed to resist American cyber capabilities. The missiles were protected by the same electronic warfare systems that defended Russian strategic assets. The second option was covert sabotage. Special operations teams could infiltrate the missile sites and plant explosive devices that would destroy the systems while making the destruction appear accidental. This approach offered the advantage of plausible deniability, but required infiltrating Turkish military installations that were now protected by Russian security personnel. The third option was direct military strike. Precision airstrikes could destroy the S-400 systems quickly and completely, but would require violating Turkish airspace and attacking installations that were technically Turkish sovereign territory. This option guaranteed mission success but virtually ensured the end of the US-Turkey alliance. The breakthrough in operational planning came from an unexpected source. Turkish military officers, horrified by Erdogan's decision to compromise NATO security, began providing intelligence to American contacts. These sources revealed that the S-400 systems would be most vulnerable during their initial deployment phase, when Russian technicians were still configuring the systems and Turkish security protocols were not yet fully implemented. By July 22, we had developed what became known as Operation Iron Shield, a multi-phase operation that would neutralize the S-400 threat while preserving the fiction of Turkish-American cooperation. The operation would begin with cyber attacks designed to disrupt Russian communications, followed by precision strikes against the missile installations, and conclude with a cover story that blamed technical malfunctions for the destruction. The presidential authorization came at 11:47 p.m. on July 23, 2019. I was in my Pentagon office reviewing final operational details when the secure phone rang. President Trump's voice was calm, but determined. "General, you are authorized to neutralize the S-400 systems on Turkish soil, by any means necessary. I want those Russian missiles turned into scrap metal, and I want it done before they become operational, whatever it takes." The operational timeline was compressed beyond anything we had attempted before. Intelligence indicated that the S-400 systems would achieve initial operational capability within 72 hours. Russian technicians were working around the clock to configure the radars and establish communication links with Moscow. Once the systems became operational, destroying them would require a full-scale military assault that would trigger Article 5 of the NATO treaty and potentially lead to war with Russia. The team selected for Operation Iron Shield represented the most elite capabilities in the American military. Navy SEALs from DevGru would conduct the ground assault. Air Force Special Operations would provide electronic warfare support, and CIA technical specialists would handle the cyber warfare components. The operation would be commanded from a joint operations center established in Cyprus, close enough to provide real-time oversight, but far enough to maintain plausible deniability. The first phase began at 2:17 a.m. on July 24th with a massive cyber attack against Russian communication systems in Turkey. NSA capabilities that had been developed over decades of Cold War confrontation were unleashed against Russian technical personnel, blinding their surveillance systems and severing their communications with Moscow. For the first time since the operation began, Russian technicians were operating without oversight from their intelligence handlers. Simultaneously, American electronic warfare aircraft began broadcasting interference patterns that would mask the approach of strike teams. The electronic assault was so sophisticated that Turkish radar operators believed they were experiencing equipment malfunctions rather than deliberate jamming. Russian technicians, cut off from their support networks, began troubleshooting technical problems that were actually coordinated attacks on their operational capabilities. The ground assault began at 4:33 a.m. when Navy SEAL teams infiltrated the S-400 installation sites. The infiltration was facilitated by Turkish military contacts who had provided detailed intelligence about Russian security procedures and Turkish guard schedules. The SEALs moved through the darkness with precision that reflected months of preparation and intelligence gathering. What they found at the missile sites exceeded our worst intelligence assessments. The S-400 installations weren't just air defense systems. They were intelligence-gathering facilities equipped with the most advanced surveillance technology Russia possessed. Russian technicians had installed equipment capable of monitoring NATO communications across the entire eastern Mediterranean. The threat was even greater than we had realized. The explosive charges placed on the S-400 systems were designed to create destruction that would appear accidental rather than sabotage. The charges would detonate in sequence, creating the impression of technical malfunctions in the missile system's power supplies. Russian technicians would find evidence of electrical failures rather than explosive devices, preserving the fiction that the destruction was accidental. But as the SEAL teams prepared to detonate the charges, intelligence intercepts revealed that Russian forces were aware of the American operation. Russian military personnel were mobilizing response teams, and Turkish security forces were being alerted to potential threats to the missile installations. The window of opportunity was closing rapidly. At 5:47 a.m., I received a communication that changed everything about the operation. The lead SEAL team reported that Russian technicians had discovered some of the explosive devices and were attempting to disarm them. The operation was compromised, and Russian forces were preparing to confront American Special Operations personnel on Turkish soil. The decision I had to make in the next 30 seconds would determine whether Operation Iron Shield succeeded or triggered a crisis that could destroy NATO. Russian forces were closing in on American Special Operations teams. Explosive devices were armed and ready to detonate, and Turkish security forces were responding to alerts about potential threats to the missile installations. All Iron Shield elements, this is command. I transmitted over encrypted communications. Execute immediately. Repeat, execute immediately. The order to detonate the charges while American forces were still in the target area represented the most dangerous command decision of my military career. The explosions began at 5:52 a.m. with a series of detonations that destroyed the S-400 radar systems and command centers. The charges functioned exactly as designed, creating destruction that appeared to result from technical malfunctions rather than sabotage. Russian technicians found evidence of electrical failures and power surges, not explosive devices. The extraction of American forces from the target area required split-second timing and perfect coordination. SEAL teams had to escape from installations that were now burning and collapsing, while Russian and Turkish security forces converged on the sites. The electronic warfare support that had masked their approach now had to conceal their departure. The immediate aftermath of the operation was carefully orchestrated chaos. Turkish officials expressed shock and confusion about the destruction of the S-400 systems. Russian technicians reported technical malfunctions that had caused catastrophic system failures. American officials expressed concern about the incident and offered assistance with the investigation. But the real test of Operation Iron Shield came in the hours following the explosions. Russian intelligence services began investigating the destruction with the assumption that it was sabotaged rather than accident. Their analysis would determine whether the operation succeeded in its primary objective of neutralizing the S-400 threat while preserving plausible deniability. The intelligence battle that followed the operation was as intense as the physical assault on the missile systems. Russian investigators analyzed debris, interviewed witnesses, and examined electronic surveillance records. American intelligence services worked to ensure that evidence of the sabotage operation remained hidden, while Russian technicians searched for proof of American involvement. The breakthrough that saved the operation came from an unexpected source. Turkish military officers who had opposed the S-400 purchase provided false testimony to Russian investigators, supporting the story that the destruction resulted from technical malfunctions rather than sabotage. These officers, horrified by Erdogan's decision to compromise NATO's security, actively assisted American efforts to conceal the truth about the operation. President Trump's reaction to the operation's success was immediate and enthusiastic. "General," he said during our post-operation briefing, "you just saved NATO. Those Russian missiles would have compromised everything we've built over 70 years. Sometimes protecting the alliance requires taking action that the alliance can't officially acknowledge. The diplomatic consequences of Operation Iron Shield were carefully managed through months of complex negotiations. Turkey officially blamed the S-400 destruction on technical failures and requested replacement systems from Russia. Moscow expressed skepticism about the official explanation but lacked sufficient evidence to prove American involvement. The strategic impact of the operation extended far beyond the immediate destruction of the S-400 systems. Russian confidence in their ability to compromise NATO from within was shaken by the mysterious failure of their most sophisticated intelligence operation. Putin's strategy of using arms sales to fracture Western alliances had suffered a significant setback. The operation also sent a clear message to other NATO allies considering Russian weapons purchases. The destruction of the S-400 systems demonstrated that America possessed the capabilities and determination to protect NATO's technological advantages, even when threats emerged from within the alliance. The psychological impact on Erdogan was profound and lasting. The Turkish president realized that his attempt to balance between Russia and America had failed dramatically. The destruction of the S-400 systems forced him to recognize that certain red lines could not be crossed without consequences that would be both immediate and irreversible. The intelligence value of Operation Iron Shield continued to pay dividends. 4 months after the operation, Russian technical documents recovered from the destroyed installations provided insights into Russian electronic warfare capabilities and intelligence gathering techniques. The operation had not only neutralized an immediate threat, but had also provided valuable intelligence about Russian capabilities. The operational security measures that protected Iron Shield required the creation of false narratives that would satisfy Russian investigators while concealing American involvement. The complexity of these deception operations rivaled the military aspects of the mission, requiring coordination between multiple intelligence agencies and careful management of evidence that might reveal American participation. The long-term consequences of the operation for U.S.-Turkey relations were complex and multifaceted. While the immediate crisis was resolved, the operation created underlying tensions that would affect bilateral relations for years. Erdogan's awareness that America had acted decisively against Turkish interests would influence his calculations in future crises. The technical lessons learned from Operation Iron Shield influenced American special operations planning for decades. The operation demonstrated that even the most sophisticated adversary systems could be defeated through careful planning, precise execution, and the courage of special operations personnel operating under impossible conditions. The men and women who executed Operation Iron Shield will never receive public recognition for their service. Their successful destruction of the S-400 systems prevented a crisis that could have compromised NATO's fundamental security while preserving the alliance relationships that were essential to Western defense. The operation proved that American military capabilities, when properly applied, could address threats that emerged from within the alliance structure itself. The destruction of the S-400 systems demonstrated that protecting NATO sometimes required taking actions that NATO could not officially acknowledge or support. Today, the sites where the S-400 systems were destroyed have been redeveloped for other purposes. The installations that once threatened to compromise NATO's most sensitive capabilities have been replaced by facilities that support alliance objectives. The crisis that nearly fractured NATO was resolved through decisive action that preserved the alliance while eliminating the threat. This is my testimony to the complexity of modern alliance relationships and the difficult decisions required to protect democratic institutions against authoritarian manipulation. Operation Iron Shield succeeded because American military and intelligence capabilities were applied with precision and determination against a threat that endangered the security of the entire Western alliance. The S-400 crisis taught us that even the closest allies can make decisions that threaten fundamental security interests. When diplomacy fails and the stakes are existential, military action becomes the only option for protecting the values and institutions that define democratic civilization. The destruction of the S-400 systems on Turkish soil represents one of the most successful covert operations in American military history. The mission succeeded in neutralizing a critical threat while preserving the alliance relationships that were essential to long-term security. It demonstrated that American resolve, when properly focused, could overcome even the most complex challenges to Western security. Looking back on Operation Iron Shield, I'm struck by how close we came to losing NATO's technological edge to Russian intelligence gathering. The S-400 crisis wasn't just about missile systems, it was about the fundamental question of whether America would allow a strategic adversary to compromise our most sensitive military capabilities through arms sales to allies. The operation succeeded because we recognized that sometimes protecting your friends requires actions your friends can't officially support. Erdogan's decision to purchase Russian missiles forced America to choose between preserving alliance harmony and protecting alliance security. We chose security, and that choice saved NATO's technological advantages for decades to come. The men and women who executed this mission understood that their actions would never be publicly acknowledged, their courage never officially recognized. They succeeded because they put mission above recognition, security above politics, and alliance protection above personal safety. Viewer engagement: if this fictional story revealed something you didn't know about modern alliance relationships and covert operations, make sure to subscribe for more classified military revelations that explore the hidden decisions that shape global security. I want to hear your thoughts on two critical questions. Question 1. Do you think America was justified in conducting covert operations against a NATO ally's military assets to protect alliance security, or should diplomatic solutions have been pursued longer, even if they risked compromising sensitive technologies? Question 2. If you were in my position as chairman of the Joint Chiefs, would you have recommended the same course of action, knowing it could permanently damage relationships with Turkey? Or would you have accepted the security risks to preserve alliance unity? Drop your answers in the comments below. I read every response, and your insights help shape future stories about the impossible decisions that military leaders face in protecting democratic values against authoritarian threats. Remember, these are the kinds of classified operations that happen in the shadows, while the world focuses on diplomatic statements and public negotiations. The real decisions that protect freedom often can't be discussed until years later, if ever. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and never forget that freedom isn't free. It's protected by people willing to make the hard choices in the darkest places.